Matthew chapter 13. The Word of God is totally, absolutely secure. It is by the foolishness of preaching men are saved, not by the foolishness of singing. And no comment by any music person will ever shake the Word. I know you do, sir. I know you do. So it has been a great day. Thank you for being here. We're looking at verse 33 again, the leaven. We're trying to deal with the parable of the leaven, and we didn't do too well last week. We got just started on a concept and didn't get through it, and I want to go back and pick that up again in order to complete that thought and try to put some things in perspective. He's had this. All of this spills out of chapter 12, which is this running controversy and debate and battle that he's doing with the Pharisees, to the point that they meet together and try to plot how they can kill him. They accuse him of being in league with Beelzebub, the ruler of the demons. And then Jesus comes up at the end of the day and begins a whole new preaching technique. And the preaching technique is one of parables. And the disciples are deeply aware of the fact he has made this shift. And they're asking, well, hey, what's the deal here? And Jesus, of course, answers that the shift has been made not to conceal things, but to reveal things. And because all that he's been doing in chapter 12, in terms of theology, in terms of taking them back to the Scriptures, in terms of all of these different methods to communicate to them, they have not gotten it. They have gone right on with their arguments and shut him down. So he is going at it in another perspective or another methodology, which is the method of parables. That somehow something would be planted within them, that the Spirit of God could bring a revelation to them that they could not get over. He has told several parables, but all of these are the parables of the kingdom. And when you come down to verse 33, it's a one-verse parable. Another parable he spoke to them: the kingdom of heaven is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal till it was all leavened. The fact that it is another parable relates you back to verse 31, which is the parable of the seed, the mustard seed, which is the smallest seed they knew anything about, that grew into the largest tree they knew anything about. So the same dynamic that's going on in verse 31 is now going on in verse 33. Again, be clear that the leaven idea all through the Scriptures is typical of sin and is used in connection with sin. And in fact, Jesus tells the disciples to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which would be the pride, the hiding, the hypocrisy, the leaven of the Pharisees. But you have no right to come to this parable and say that this is sin, because it doesn't fit. So it's not always true that leaven is a part of sin or stands for sin, and it certainly isn't true in this parable. He's giving us an amazing idea in this parable, and there are 3 parts to this concept that we are trying to talk about. One is the measure that he gives us, the measure idea. Second is the method idea in the parable. The method is the method of the leaven, which is, I can hardly wait to get to talk about that. But that's a whole another part of the concept. The third is the mastery. You notice that in the parable, it was all leavened. There is no partial here. It's going to be all or nothing. It's all out or it isn't all at all. It's total or it isn't going to be. He's Lord of all or he isn't Lord at all. It's not kind of, I'm partially Christian. You either are or you aren't. And that's the impact of the leaven itself. So we're dealing with the issue of measure, which we started last week. And the concept of the measure idea is that he sets up this leaven and then gives us this picture of 3 measures of meal, which has to be for a reason. He doesn't tell us how much leaven there was, but the indication is it's just a small amount. And the meal, he enlarges to the 3 measures of meal. And this small amount of leaven just does its thing entirely through the 3 measure, regardless of how big it is. So something small is moving itself into, and a powerful influence into the whole of that which is large. Now you realize that's the same identical picture he gives in verse 31 of the smallest of seeds, which now has moved into the largest of trees. So you get that whole idea that the kingdom is something that is not should I say spectacular. It's not something that's noisy. It's not something that's large and deals with particulars. It's something that begins to eat at the inward life of the being. And before it gets done, it permeates into and dominates your entire life, if you will let it. That seems to be the picture. And this is a reoccurring theme over and over and over and over again throughout the scriptures. We found it in the Sermon on the Mount. Again, the idea of helplessness, which is I'm so small in my ability, so helpless in my discipline, so small in what I can pull off, so it's not worth doing. And yet that, merged with the leaven of his presence, begins to move into my life and do something so phenomenal beyond my ability that you can't imagine it. That life can be different. Now, we started last week talking about 3 aspects to this measure concept. One is the idea of the impossible, and we did talk about that last week, which again is the helpless. Well, this is impossible, I know. Well, I can't pull this off. Exactly. Well, this cannot be done. You're right. Hey, the bread, the dough is going to be flat. It's going to be hard. It's just dough unless something is released within it that literally changes the dough into the fullness of the loaf that it is destined to be. And it takes this leaven. So the impossibility. So if you're looking at Christianity and you're saying, I hear this all over the evangelical church, this is impossible. You're right. You cannot live above sin. Exactly. Have you tried it? Yes, I have. Can you do it? No, I cannot. Why? I am helpless. But could it be that there is a resource bigger than I am that can be leavened in my system, the leaven in my being that could permeate my life and bring me to an impossible kind of living? Could 11 guys who are fishermen without education shake an entire world? Why would you come to them with a great commission and say, go and win a whole world? Why would you do that? That's not the group you would come to, because that is an impossible task. But could they be the leaven of the kingdom that would literally begin to permeate a world, and in 70 years they brought the world to its knees? 25,000 people in Lebanon, Tennessee. Could this group right here be the leaven that literally permeates and masters and infiltrates and literally brings about a massive revival that literally shifts the whole tone and destiny of the people of our town? Well, that's impossible. I know. But that's the parable. It's the whole impossible idea. Now, transfer that into your own life. Well, it's impossible. I know. Well, I've messed up. I got that. Well, hey, my situation is so complicated. Absolutely. I mean, the details are, whoa, you're right. There's no way. Absolutely. I couldn't be. You're right. Just throw up your hands and say, hey, I'm helpless. And let's admit it. And let that be the catalyst that allows his presence to come and do in you the amazing things that he wants to do. So Jesus is strong on this impossible idea. One other idea I wanted to give to you in connection with this impossible idea is the insignificant idea. I shake my head over this. See, you would think, because we've been trained this way, everything that seems to be successful took planning, hard work, took effort, took putting things in place, took mastering it, and after you got that done, for instance, if you want to be a doctor, how do you pull that off? Well, you have to go through high school, you have to go through college, you have to go through medical training, you go through internship at the hospital, you just on and on and on and on and on it goes, and finally you get to do the See, all of life is like that. You don't just get up one morning, people, and say, I think I'll run a marathon. You have to train. Good night. You got to begin to run the 5 miles and then run the 10 miles, and you got to train every day, and you got to come on, and then you go the 26-mile marathon. You don't just you can't. I mean, that's the way life is. It takes training and discipline and laying it out and planning on it and getting. So if you want to be a Christian, how you going to do it? Well, you got to plan. You got to train. You got to discipline yourself. You got to, come on, get on your knees, read your Bible. Don't say amen on this, please. See, that's the thought process, right? And he says, what would happen if you'd just be 3 measures of meal and let the leaven come? And what seems to be so insignificant, man, I see this in my own life. There's a verse, we talked about it in one of the classes this last semester, but there's a verse in Matthew, only one verse. It's quoted again in Mark chapter 15, but it's in relationship to the crucifixion. See, this guy by the name of Simon, he's from Cyrenia, and he came to Jerusalem. Religious holiday. He comes every year with his family, wife, 2 sons. He's a businessman. And he comes for the Feast of the Passover. And it's a religious holiday mixed a little with business so you can write it off on the business expense. So he does some sales along the way, gets some meetings, and he had plans for his son, to be with his boys, some outing that he was going to do with them that afternoon in the midst of this religious holiday. And so, but that morning he had an appointment, a business appointment. So he went out of town, out of Jerusalem, and he went to his business appointment, got the whole thing taken care of. He's on his way back, hurrying so he won't be late to take his boys out for the outing. So as he comes into Jerusalem, he suddenly realizes he did the wrong thing because he went down the wrong road. There's a large crowd down there. He should have bypassed that. He should have just swept off into the side streets and made his way around, but he didn't. And he came in the large crowd, and he got right in the middle. Can you believe this? Right? Incidental. It just kind of happened. Nobody planned this. He got right in the middle of this, what do you want to call it? A parade. And these guys, one of them named Jesus, of course, is carrying his cross. And he's stumbling and falling. And the crowd is hooting and hollering and throwing things. And it's massive, and it's so blocked that he can't get around this crowd. So he ducks back into a doorway just to wait while they go by, just to wait it out. So inconvenient, isn't it? I mean, he's got an appointment for his boys. He should have turned left when he shouldn't have come down this. But hey, here he is. So he steps back in the doorway, waiting for the crowd to come by. And as the crowd comes by, Jesus, can you believe this? Right in front of him, falls on his face with this cross thing. And wow, I mean, he has no dog in this fight. This is not, he's an innocent, just business deal. Hey, just on my way to take my boys to an outing. I'm not a part of this. And suddenly Simon finds a sword in his face and a Roman soldier saying, "You're going to carry the man's cross." What an inconvenience. Oh, brother, he just got a new suit. Can you imagine what the cross is going to do? I mean, the thing is bloody already. It's going to be all over him. It's going to ruin the suit. It's just, what a mess. I'll be late for, how long will this take? Oh, man. So he stoops. He doesn't have a choice. Gets the cross on his shoulder. Carries it out. It's just an incident you want to forget. It's it's not a good break. It's no big deal. Hey, I'll get over it. My boys will understand. I'll take them on a double outing tomorrow. But do you realize the man's whole life was changed? Out of that, his wife got converted. His two boys, Alexander and Rufus, are named by Paul as important ministers. Rufus is at least important ministers in the church. Paul calls Simon's wife his mother. Where did all of that come from? Who planned this anyway? Just a drop of leaven in somebody's loaf. Do you understand God has done that for you? I can go back in my life. I was that close to missing this whole thing. But the right person at the right time. I just stood back in a doorway, and suddenly and my whole life was. And while you haven't gotten up and trained for a marathon, and while you haven't gone through the education process, while that's not been a part of God has literally come after you with an amazing, will not let you, has planted leaven in your system, brother. And it's just got a hook in you that he's just not going to turn you loose. And shake your head and say, "Good night. How did I get to this service on a Saturday night?" Well, it's a doorway thing. So the whole picture of the leaven idea is this planting, and of course we call this prevenient grace. It's this planting of a divine God's presence within your life as he is literally manipulating the scene beyond what you know and see. And if I'm not to plan it, if I don't have to discipline it, if I don't have to get up and do the training for the marathon, what's my involvement in this? Well, would you respond to the leaven? Would you let it happen? Would you just let him take over? Would you just get out of yourself? Would you just... That's the picture. I love that. So we're not calling you to shape up. We're not calling you to work harder. We're not calling you to chapter a day keeps the devil away. We're not calling you to that. See, we're calling you to, wow, would you just open to him? Would you just respond to him? Would you just be 3 measures of meal and allow him to, he will invade you. You cannot miss it. You can't stay confused. It's impossible because the leaven is working. And he's going to invade your life with his presence and do in you what you have no idea. And that's part of the irritation of the whole thing. He's doing stuff I don't know about. Looks like he ought to inform me, right? It's my life. But he doesn't care because he's doing something bigger than you know. Because he's the leaven that's invading the 3 measures of meal. Phenomenal. One other part of this concept, the impossible, the insignificant, and the immediate. If you say, okay, if all of that is true, if Christianity is absolutely impossible, and there's no way to be a complete loaf, and I can't pull that off, the leaven is the only thing that can do that. And if it's not in my training, not in my education, not in what I do, not in the discipline, not in I'll get it done kind of thing, it's in the invasion of his presence in my life. And will I allow him to invade me? Where do I start in all of that? How do I get that done? Someone has already moved in your behalf. See, it isn't that there isn't preparation. It isn't that somebody doesn't have to go to school and hack out the degree and get the knowledge. It isn't that. It isn't that somebody doesn't have to lay down the foundation. It isn't that somebody has to train to run the marathon. It isn't that. But the news is somebody's already done that. The training is all over. Remember the dad, wish we had the video. Remember, it was all over the news years ago. The dad whose son was paralyzed and yet wanted to run this, whatever it was. And the dad, it's a beautiful picture. The dad trains with this boy who's in a wheelchair and pushes him. For the bicycle thing, for the jogging thing, for the swimming thing, for all of it. And did the whole thing. And his son, that's the picture. That there is a Jesus who will carry you through the grueling bicycle run and the jogging run and the swimming and will take you. He's already sweated it out. And would you relax, please? Come on. Would you respond? And I'm preaching to myself now. Every ounce of stress is a blockade to that movement. It's a blockade to it. So the whole picture that he's painting of this great scene is the movement of God planting himself. Leaven looks insignificant. Can't be done. I got it. But he's plotting. He's planning. He's already pulled it off. That's what this was all about. Jesus, we're so foolish about this that we ask the question, well, what should I do when you've done it all already? The dough, the 3 measures of meal, does not ask, what should I do? It responds to the leaven that's flowing within its system. And we came down a road, man. We thought we were out for a business deal, coming back to take our boys on an outing, and stepped back in a doorway, got ourselves in the middle of an overwhelming plan. Divine prophecy being fulfilled. Got ourselves in the midst of what you had destined for life itself. And God, most of us, all of us, maybe here tonight, are standing in the doorway, wondering how on earth we got here. But you have literally manipulated the very essence of our history to bring us to this moment. Will we respond to you? Will we turn you loose? Will we say, okay, Jesus, I'm yours. Will I resign as general of my universe? Will I give up playing the God role in my life? Will I have sense enough to quit planning my own existence when none of my plans have ever come out? And will I have sense enough to allow the leaven of your presence to just so magnificently fill my life that my world will be fed with the bread of life? Please, Jesus, please. Make it a divine moment in my life.